Among his maxims are the importance among sick people of forming strong bonds of mutual support, of facing fears of dying and death directly, of reordering life priorities, of learning to control pain and other symptoms with self-hypnosis. Dr. Speigel has had a long experience and interest in the use of hypnosis in medicine. He will hypnotize you later on. He did hypnotize a huge bunch of doctors in Cebu. In fact, he and his father, Herbert Speigel, co-authored what is now the standard textbook on the uses of clinical psychology, which is called Trance and Treatment. Dr. Speigel is married to Helen Blau, with whom he has 2 children, Daniel, 27, an architect, who graduated from Harvard School of Design, and Julia, 24, a Stanford graduate who is living in Kampala, Uganda, as a policy analyst, but will be attending law school at Yale next year and public policy at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy at Princeton, 2 Ivy League schools at the same time. I think she took after the father. But he did not allow Mrs. Blau to be anesthetized during these 2 deliveries. What a brute, you would think. But she did not suffer any pain. He hypnotized her. Dr. Speigel knows where all those lonely people come from and can show them and will show them that after all, they still do belong. If you happen to suffer from depression, and I hope to God not one of you does, Dr. Speigel will reassure you that after the night and the music dies, and they have taken away the stars, there is hope, and you will smell the roses again. These lines sound a little musical, and I intended them to be musical because one of the things he does is he sings. He loves to sing. He doesn't really have a nice voice, but he insists. And he plays a mean guitar. But from all the things I tell you, don't believe that his life is just a ball of cherries. He has had some problems. I don't know if this is true, but I am told that one time he had a patient who issued a check that bounced. He called the patient and says, "Mrs. Smith, your check came back." And she said, "Yes, Dr. Speigel, I know. So did my depression." Ladies and gentlemen, the man.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Solar. I feel blessed in many ways. I'm very grateful to be here, blessed by your presence, blessed by the words of the good Father, blessed by the opportunity to speak with you about depression, blessed by the presence of many people here who have themselves suffered terrible losses, who've lost children to depression. Jeannie Goulbourn and the Goulbourn Foundation, I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing, and I admire your willingness to turn your personal tragedy into an occasion to offer help to others and try to prevent these tragedies. So I very much admire that. I'm also reminded of a story of a doctor who gave a lecture like this in Texas, and there was a very wealthy man in the audience who heard it and said, "You know, what you're saying could change the way medicine is delivered, and what's your salary?" And he told him, and he said, "Well, I will quadruple it if you will spend the next year driving around the country giving this lecture at every medical school in the United States." And he thought about it for a second or two, and he said, "Well, sure." So he hit the road, and he and his driver became uncomfortably close from all these hours driving together. And the driver said, "You know, Doc, This really isn't fair. By the way, can you hear in the back? Is the sound okay? Nobody asleep yet in the back? You're all okay. And he said, you know, the driver said, this really isn't right. You know, you get paid 20 times what I do, and I've heard that damn talk of yours so many times that I could give it. And the doctor said, well, I'll tell you what, the next talk isn't very important. It's only at Harvard. So I will put on the driver's uniform, you put on my suit, and give the talk, and we'll see what happens. And it goes very well. It goes flawlessly until a professor raises his hand, stands up, and asks a very long, very complex, and very hostile question. And there's a long pause, and the driver said, you know, I've heard some ignorant questions in my day, he said. But this one is so ignorant that I'm going to let my driver answer it. So I speak to you as the driver today. What I hope to do is share with you some of our experiences over 30 years. Another reason I'm blessed is to have had the opportunity to work at Stanford for 33 years. My wife and I came to California in 1975 for a year, and we just never left. And we've been very fortunate to be able to work at Stanford. And I'd like to share with you some of what we've learned in those decades of research at Stanford. Since I'm a psychiatrist, though, I have to discuss psychopharmacology. And so here is the way we dispense antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications in California. It's on the freeway. And I can assure you that if either the stock market or the election goes the wrong way, we're going to need more freeways like this in a month. What I hope to do is talk with you about stress and distress, acute medical stressors and how we can manage them, chronic stress including depression and anxiety disorders, and how we can handle them, and how the mind and the body interact, what we understand about that. Because what we've been faced in medicine, I suspect it's true here in the Philippines as it is in the United States, is we go from one extreme to the other and they're both wrong. The traditional biotechnological medical model is that the body is just a machine, and if you just fix the machine, you've taken care of the problem, and it really doesn't matter very much what the mind does. That's been called Cartesian dualism, you know, that Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. What happens in our head happens in our head, and what happens in our body happens there. They have nothing to do with one another. However, the other extreme is also wrong, and that's the idea that flourishes in Northern California, that if you just fix a problem in your head, it will automatically be fixed in your body. And we're not built that way either. But what is the case is the way you handle stressors, what you think and feel, does have an effect on your body and its ability to deal with illness. And that's what I would like to talk to you about. First, I want to discuss the concept of stress, because there are three kinds of stress. Now, we all live with stressors every day. They're things that come from the environment and force us to respond. It's something we have to worry about, something we have to deal with. It can be anything from paying bills to understanding a new pain in our body, to dealing with family problems. They're all stressors. They call for action. And they tend to make us feel worse when there isn't much we can do about it. So part of bad stress is helplessness. And the word stress actually comes from metallurgy. That, you know, if you bend a piece of metal, you create stress lines in the metal, and they become vulnerable so that the metal will not be as strong in the future. So you don't want to have stressors that weaken you. Indeed, there are stressors that strengthen you. That's been called eustress or resilience. And I think you can all think back to a time, and I admire the people here who are using the tragedies in their own life now as a source of strength to help other people deal with a serious situation. And that's a way of converting stress into eustress, something that makes you resilient because you've seen it before, you've dealt with it before, and you feel stronger for it. That's a positive outcome from a stress. Then there is distress. That's depression and anxiety. That's when you feel so overwhelmed by the stressor that you can't do anything about it. So what we try to do is, that's depression and anxiety. That's when you feel so overwhelmed by the stressor that you can't do anything about it. So what we try to do is keep stress from becoming distress, and we will talk about ways in which we can do that. There's tremendous interest in the U.S. and I think around the world in ways that we can help people better manage the stress that comes with medical illness, and this was from Time magazine with an interest in techniques like hypnosis. And they had an article about how we have used hypnosis in major procedures and major neurosurgical procedures to help people handle that stress better. And Dr. Solar was right that both of our children were delivered with hypnosis as the sole anesthesia. The first labor was 10 hours long, and in the middle of it, my wife said, you know, I'm a pharmacology professor, there are drugs for this. And I said, just keep breathing deeply. You're floating in Lake Tahoe, you're cool and numb. And Daniel was delivered fine, and I had no pain at all. Julia's delivery went even better. 4 hours, she was out, and Helen was feeling fine. So hypnosis and techniques like it can be a powerful way for the mind to help control the stress that's going on in the body. One of the things that has happened in modern medicine, one reason I'm here and you're here, is that the very success of modern medicine in curing or at least controlling many serious illnesses like cancer and heart disease and diabetes is that we have created a new kind of problem. It's a good problem to have. Cancer used to be thought of as a terminal illness. We don't talk about it that way anymore. Half of all people diagnosed with cancer will live to die of something else. So cancer has become a chronic illness rather than a terminal illness, one you have to live with, but not one that's going to kill you right away. Our modern healthcare systems are largely designed to help people with acute medical problems, with a heart attack, with a broken arm, with a bowel obstruction. We know how to do that very well. We are less well prepared to deal with the problems that come with chronic illness, like pain, anxiety, and depression. And studies have shown, this is from the Kaiser Foundation, that the majority of people who seek what we call complementary or alternative medicine, it's about 40% of Americans, I think it's 80% of Filipinos, seek complementary or alternative medicine often before going to mainstream medical care for problems like chronic pain and anxiety, which in fact are not handled as well in mainstream medicine. So we need to find new ways of dealing with the stressors that come with life-threatening illness. As I mentioned, 42% of Americans seek alternative medicine. Half of our cancer patients do. And the real problem is that most of them don't tell their doctors what they're doing, and that's a problem because there can be complications from the herbal treatments that they're taking that can interfere with the medications the doctors are prescribing. So one of the things that I've been working toward for decades is to try to bring these two camps together, to learn what we can learn from the alternative medicine world, from what traditional healers are doing, and test it scientifically and see what works and what doesn't, so that we can bring it, when it belongs, into mainstream medicine. And this is a chart that shows that Americans made more visits to alternative care practitioners than they did to primary care doctors. So it isn't just the Philippines where people go to healers. I was hearing the other day that people often go to spiritualists if they think that they're possessed by a demon or something like that, and they have some kind of a ceremony, and supposedly the spirit is supposed to go away. And I was reminded that what happens if you don't pay him is that you get repossessed. You have to be... Americans spend more out of pocket on alternative medical care than they do on mainstream medical care. So it's a huge medical industry as well, and I'm sure that's the case here too. So there's something we have to understand better and take seriously. He's saying, I'm sorry, Mr. McConnell, your insurance plan only pays for sympathetic nodding and a saddened downward glance. There's a $200 copay for any additional words of compassion, not to exceed 40 words or 3 expressions of sympathy or condolence. We have wonderful medical care in the United States. We have a problem with our health insurance system, which is interfering more than helping.